Hello and welcome to Car Dealer Live, a special show today where we are talking about Tier 4 restrictions that came into play yesterday, Sunday, December the 20th. Proof that this year isn't done yet with surprises, really. Why is this all so important? Well, effectively, it means dealers in London and parts of the South East and the East of England are back into lockdown. Dealers in Wales went into Tier 4 on December the 19th, and showrooms in Northern Ireland will be locked down from December the 26th for a month and a half with no click and collect allowed. So, with so much variation across the country, what can dealers do to keep business going and keeping the lights on whilst remaining on the right side of the law? Well, joining me is Nona Bokis from Lawgistics, Stacey Turner from CG Professional, and our very own James Baggott, who actually is in a Tier 4 area. So, hello all.
Hello.
Morning. Oh, afternoon.
Hello, lovely to have you all on. Now, this is a live show. If you have any questions about Tier 4 restrictions or anything that we're talking about, then please do pop them into the comments box and we'll get through as many as we can in the next 20 to 30 minutes or so. Right, let's get cracking then. James, can I come to you first of all? Whilst I was having a good time over the weekend, you were hunched over the keyboard covering the Prime Minister's announcement. So,
yeah,
I mean, were you surprised? I mean, what are your thoughts on all of this?
Well, thanks, Boris, for ruining another weekend, and rather depressing news it was too. I mean, there we are. Here we go again, back to click and collect for Tier 4 dealers. The news came out on Saturday, as we all know. It has a big impact for car dealers in those Tier 4 areas. Covering the news this morning, it does seem like this is probably going to roll out far wider across the country, probably pretty quickly. Yesterday, we had the most infections, I think, recorded on a single day all year. It was double that of last Sunday. Which I think means that many more dealers are going to be heading to Tier 4 pretty soon. Matt Hancock, the Health Secretary, came out this morning, he came out yesterday saying that they think these restrictions could last well into spring. So a bit of a recap, really, into what these restrictions mean. Firstly, it's, yes, back to click and collect for Tier 4 dealers and home deliveries. The dealers I spoke to the weekend, which included Paul Hendy from the Hendy Group, Dash Gupta from Marshall Motor Group, and a couple of others, all said they were obviously very well set up for this. Just happened off the back of November, a full national lockdown. They know how to do click and collect and home deliveries. Most of the motor industry is very well set up for it. It doesn't work as well as having customers into showrooms. However, some dealers we've been reported on managed to make just as many sales in November during the national lockdown as they did last November. So there is some good news to be had there, as painful as click and collect is. It does mean showrooms are closed, but service remains open. That means MOTs can continue, service and after sales work can continue. And that did happen quite extensively during the November lockdown. No extension to MOTs. So anybody thinking that they're going to get another extension, that's not going to happen. I mean, I think most people would probably say that was pretty disastrous. It had to be put in place at that time, but it's caused no end of pain in pushing forward those MOTs to this part of the year. So yeah, car dealers back to click and collect. The good thing is, quieter time of the year, December for dealers anyway. It's for 2 weeks at the moment. I think we probably all can accept it's going to be for much longer than that. I do think the industry, though, is going to be completely baffled by this. I mean, I've just come back from Morrison's, James. Just had to pick up a few bits for the Christmas shop. It was absolute chaos. It was completely and utterly heaving with people. No social distancing taking place whatsoever. Staff seemingly completely oblivious to the rules, but yet a mile down the road in Gosport, obviously we're in a Tier 4 area, car dealers are closed. You know, they could be operating with an appointment-based system far safer and far more securely than the shops that are actually open. I think it's absolute madness, if you ask me, and I can see why car dealers are so angry. But there are a few questions. I mean, firstly, and my question to Nona and Stacey would be, what are the rules when it comes to dealers who are in tier 4 areas, like Gosport, where they're right on the cusp of a tier 2 area, yet just 2 miles away? Are those people living in that tier 2 area allowed to visit this tier 4 dealership? Because this is a problem that's quite small and isolated at the moment, but it's going to extend, isn't it, across the country?
Yeah, shall I jump in first then?
Feel free
Yeah,
to.
I mean, yeah, it's going to be a big issue, and you're right. And the guidance again is not very clear, again, because it was rushed out, as we've said many times this year. But you can come out of tier 4 if you've got what they're saying is a reasonable excuse, and it's saying stay local. And I'm in the tier 2, and we're next door to Peterborough, which is tier 4. And for a lot of people, they're saying our shops in Peterborough are more local than my shops sort of going the other way in the area. So this is going to be an issue wherever you are in the country, I think, just because it's split. But the new schedule that's come out, which basically regurgitates a lot of the law that came out for the November restrictions. So basically it's the same as that, but tier 4 does say if it's reasonably necessary and you can buy for yourself or someone from your household or vulnerable person from a tier 4 business. So yes, you can cross the borders. And in fact, I had a client on the phone this morning in England who sold a car last week to Wales, and he said one of my salesmen got stopped on their way in this morning because the dealership's in tier 2, the employee works in 4, and he was actually stopped to say, what are you doing? Obviously, if you're allowed to work, that's a reasonable excuse. And I've also said that I think you're fine to deliver the car to Wales, because although Wales, the whole of Wales is in this alert level 4, they can stay open for click and deliver and click and collect. So yeah, I think my reading of it is you can move between the tiers and the levels and the various nations, although I think Scotland's probably perhaps slightly different because Nicola Sturgeon doesn't want anybody going in or out, I think.
Oh, it's quite a tough one though, isn't it? I mean, all the investigations I did in the weekend seem to suggest that travelling into a tier 4 area was a big no-no from any other tier. I mean, Stacey, are you saying to your clients that they can accept customers in from these different tiers? It doesn't sound right, does it?
It doesn't, but I'm strongly of the opinion that if you've got your protective measures in place, because we know that the PPE works, we know that the measures work ultimately, then yes, it's permissible, especially for servicing an MOT and everything that can remain open. My view is that's absolutely fine. Just make sure you're following the rules on the social distancing. And then on the click and collect, like Nona said, I mean, ultimately it's only like, if you think about Amazon will continue delivering to all areas regardless, again, with all the distancing in place. So in my view, car dealers can continue to honour deliveries. They'll have had orders throughout up until yesterday. Let's get all those orders delivered as normal, but just on a click and collect basis.
Stacey, I mean, we've seen lots of dealers throughout this year. They've really ramped up their communication strategy. They've learned the best ways to communicate to customers. Would your advice be for now for dealers who are in tier 4 areas to notify customers and to put it out there that it's still safe to actually buy a car? Because I'm sure there's going to be
100%
out there who, combined with the fact that December is a bit of a slow month to buy cars anyway, lots of people are going to be put off from all of this anyway because they're confused.
Yeah, I agree. And I think there will be customers out there, James, that are reluctant to travel, reluctant to leave their homes, as we've had, throughout the year. But ultimately, as we proved in November, you can carry on. And operations can continue to an extent as long as you're following the rules and the guidelines. And as we've all said, and we all agree, it's one of the safest places actually to operate because of the space, because of the measures, because of the protection. So, as I've said to my clients, it's a new challenge, but we've done it before, we've been there before. Christmas is slightly different because obviously it's harder trading times anyway, but there's nothing stopping dealers from getting those deliveries done and just doing their utmost to reassure customers that it is safe and they're continuing to open and trade.
One of the questions that we've had in via email is on the staffing. It's all very well on the customer side of things, but what happens if you've got staff that live in tier 2 areas and your dealership is in a tier 4 area? how does that work? I mean, should they be coming in? Should they?
If they can't work from home, James, yeah, they can go in. If they can't do their work from home, which obviously in a dealership setting is quite difficult, depending on what role you've got, the government have said that you're still all right to go into work, unless you're obviously one of the very clinically vulnerable categories.
Does that vice versa? So if they, if they live in a tier 4 area in the dealership, they're going to work at
again, yeah. Unless your job can be done at home, or it's a special category of clinically vulnerable employees that obviously have separate rules attached to them.
Right, okay. Now, Chris Willingborn from Cars of Upminster would be pleased to hear that, that's for sure.
You might find reluctance though, James, some employees, and throughout the year again, it's been the same, there has been reluctance, hasn't there, on behalf of some employees who feel concerned or particularly vulnerable, and that might be a challenge, but actually the government have come out and confirmed that going to work is one of the reasons that you can travel.
And I know that we covered this earlier in the year, but for those staff members who are concerned about travelling and saying to their employers, I don't want to come in, or I won't come in because you're in a tier 4 area, what can those employers say to those employees? Can they force them?
Yeah, well, I think they can, unless there is a genuine reason or there's some sort of vulnerability, then obviously it's a case-by-case basis. But, you have to go into work. And if the government has said it's safe to go into work as much as it can do, then, yeah, that's fine, I think. And employees shouldn't, because there will be some employees that just think, oh, this is nice, I'll have an extended Christmas. But there will, on the other hand, be people with genuine issues as well. So it really is case by case. But yeah, I think employers, are in a position to say to people, well, no, you've got to come in. We've got the measures in place. We've got our risk assessment in place. You need to come in.
Yeah. No. Was click and collect actually? Has it been written in the guidance? Or perhaps I'm being too positive about government guidance here. But it seemed to be within minutes or within half an hour of the announcement being made, it was assumed that click and collect was allowed. And click and collect really has been the saviour of many dealers this year, hasn't it? Because it's proved to be quite an effective way of buying and selling cars, isn't it?
Yeah, certainly a lot of our dealers have done very well, and they've got the systems set up now, and they're quite happy going that way. Obviously, it doesn't beat the showroom model, as James said earlier. But yeah, it's fine, because literally the law is just literally regurgitating what they already set out in November. So it's sort of an adjustment to that for tier 4, and that's all it is. But yeah, click and collect is fine as it was in November. The only way it's not is in Northern Ireland, who for some reason from the 26th of December, they actually say that there's no click and collect either, unless that changes. But it doesn't seem to outlaw click and deliver, which is interesting, but there may be further guidance on that. But for the moment, Scotland, England, Wales can click and collect, click and deliver, but from Boxing Day in Northern Ireland, it says they can't do click and collect car dealers either, and that's for 6 weeks. It says maybe reviewed at 4 weeks. Not quite sure what the thinking is behind that, or whether that's a rushed out thing that will perhaps get amended, but that is how that stands currently from Boxing Day.
Yeah, and it just dovetails with what James was saying earlier on, this frustration that car dealers are just completely sidelined, and it's a showroom is deemed to be a dangerous environment when we know for a fact they aren't. And then many dealers have, they've been living with this since March, and there've been processes and restrictions in place. Dealers are ready for all this. Goodness only knows why Northern Irish dealers can't run a click and collect model. It's very disappointing to hear that.
So I was just going to say on that point, I'd be interested to hear what Stacey and Nona think, because there's been some calls from some investors into the motor trade saying they think some dealers and dealer groups should get together and challenge these lockdowns, challenge these tiers, and fight for the fact that they should be allowed to remain open like garden centres. Do you think, but both of these are very, very good legal experts. Do you think that's something, challenge like that could work?
I think people should be speaking up. Sorry, Stacey, should be speaking up more, because in Scotland, they were allowed to sort of carry on. And in Scotland, the guidance says you can still do test drives, even in their highest, well, they levels up there, not tiers, are they? So in their highest level, car dealers can operate. So whether there was a Scottish motor trade did a little bit more with the government up there, I don't know. But you're right, it's much safer going in a car showroom than it is to the food supermarket, especially now with all this France news and lorries being stuck on down in Kent, etc., which is probably what's fueled the mass pile-on in the supermarkets this morning from there. But yeah, I think it's a safe environment, and I think, can we do more lobbying? Probably, as an industry, I think yes.
I think there has been a lot of lobbying, hasn't there, James? That, from what I know, that there has been a lot of petition of the government, and unfortunately, up till now, it's fallen on deaf ears. My concern is that the chances of it being turned around, before the restrictions are lifted anyway, are probably quite limited. So, if I was in a dealer's shoes, I'd be putting my efforts into just making the most out of what I could, because there's a lot that can still be done. Certainly, and as we saw in November, at the end of the day, there's opportunity out there. People still need cars, so let's just look at it in a different. And we're all in the same boat, we're all in the same situation. So competition is fair, pretty much. So let's just go for it.
Sorry.
Yeah, Stacey, do you think we could? I'll come to you as well, Nona, on this. I mean, what are the key things which dealers should be thinking about if they're in a tier 4 restriction area here? I mean, could the advice even be, look, between now and New Year, completely shut up shop, or is it to try and carry on in the best way possible? What things do you think you should be advising?
I think if my view was being, what I've been advising is get your deliveries out. I think that's got to be the aim, hasn't it, for year end? Let's get the deliveries out that we've already on orders that have already been sold. I would definitely keep open with communication. I definitely keep open throughout the year with customers, because there are still opportunities out there. There's still a lot to be done for year end anyway. And also, let's not forget that Brexit is looming. So there's plenty of planning to be done for that. There's plenty of things on the horizon that are going to change as of next year from a Brexit perspective. So I think ultimately there's still a lot to be done to prepare.
Yeah. And Nona, anything to add on that?
Yeah, no, it's the same. And I think I'm speaking to a lot of dealers, and it's kind of worked out because they're looking at sort of Cazoo and then those main sort of click and deliver businesses, and the franchises and even some of the smaller independents are saying we want to compete with them now. And I think this has almost forced them to do that and have the system set up. So I think for some dealers it has been a positive, and I say a lot of our dealers are saying their sales this year have been very good, because people are getting used to buying online and ordering, even with cars. That is where everything is headed this year. Look at the Royal Mail, they are overrun because so many people are buying online that wouldn't have done normally. That's just the way we're moving at the moment.
It's certainly worked for a large number of dealers, but I know equally some others have struggled with it. I mean, there's a comment here from Ace's Auto Mall Limited. He says he thinks the restrictions are very, very unfair to smaller dealerships. Because they struggle with the staff to get the cars off the premises, etc. Question to you both here on from your best car in Bucks. Can you put a vulnerable member of staff on furlough if they've asked to be? So I'm assuming he's suggesting there's someone who has to be shielding because of the restrictions. Are they allowed to be placed on furlough?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely, 100%, yeah.
Nice, solid answer.
James.
I take it from that answer, Nona, you completely agree with that one.
Yeah. I mean, furlough's been a nightmare all year, is it? Changing in and out, and now it's going on to April as well, and not March, of course. So, but yeah, I agree.
Yes, right. Is it right to have the viewpoint that any dealers watching this who aren't in a tier 4 at the moment, they may be very happily operating in a tier 2, they may even be on the Isle of Wight or in Cornwall, they may even be in a tier 1. Should dealers be paying close attention to all of this and thinking, look, there's a high possibility that these tier 4 restrictions are going to affect most of England, Wales and Scotland. It's going to be another national lockdown. We've got to get steps in place for this to get worse.
I think so, James. No, I was going to say, I think we'll agree, Nina, but I think we all know what's coming, don't we, ultimately? So I'm not sure what you can do so much to actually prepare for it, and mentally prepare yourself, perhaps, for what's to come. But I think my view is we're probably going to see a similar situation to November in January, sort of across the country, which is, you know, it's not the best start to the year, is it, ultimately? You know, not to be pessimistic, but it's not ideal.
Yeah. And the point is, well, most dealers are prepared for all of this. They've gone through various, and of course there've been local restrictions throughout the year as well, not just the national ones. So there are plenty of dealers who are out there who probably have the view that, right, here we go again, and it's just getting all the plans in place, ready for what could be a very difficult start to the year. No.
Yeah, I think so. But say we've been through it for most of the year now. It's just carrying on the same and picking it up. Yeah, and just expect that we could be going to click and collect, click and deliver wherever you are, and getting all those things in place, having the right paperwork in place, and knowing how to deal with that.
Yeah.
Just one last one from me, Nona, on the furlough side of things. There was some talk, wasn't there, that not too long ago that furlough wasn't just for Christmas. That, you know, that there were some dealers thinking that they could use the furlough scheme for what is traditionally the quieter time of year. Has this kind of given it a bit of a kind of open season, really, for dealers to just in those areas to just place whichever staff they want to on furlough without question from HMRC in the future?
I think it's probably made it easier to do that than perhaps last week, for example, from there, because remember, you can only put people on furlough as a direct result of COVID. So this is a sort of result of COVID. So it's probably more room to argue this week than there was last week to put people down. But of course, you can't just put people on if you would normally close. That's the sort of thing the government was trying to get across there. If you're closed between Christmas and New Year, you shouldn't just put people on furlough instead of the closure. But yeah, this does give people a bit more room to be a bit more flexible, perhaps, with their furlough claims. Although, as I've always said, don't mess with HMRC. You know, don't push those boundaries too far.
Yeah. Well, fantastic. Nona, Stacey, thank you very much for coming on today. And I fear as though we're going to be talking about this again in early January. So be prepared. Be prepared for some.
I'm going on holiday.
I'm going with you, Nona.
Well, it may be James and I just talking about this in January. Regardless, we'll be covering all announcements in depth through Christmas and into the early new year. That's it for today, but thank you very much for joining us today. Hopefully your questions have been answered, but until next time, thanks very much for watching and goodbye.